entrepreneurial spirit or we don't know how to grow businesses. Indians go outside and do exceedingly well. But it was the environment which was created which did not enable entrepreneurialism to flourish. The result of a lack of competition and the licensing and control system, as you well know, was that there was no importance at all to people improving quality or trying to make cost improvements, because even if you made better products and there was a greater demand for your product, you couldn't produce more because the license restricted the amount which you could actually produce. Exceeding that amount was an offense for which you could be sent to jail. Technology development did not take place. Research and development was not encouraged because none of these were required. You produced what you could produce, people had to buy what was available. So that's the way our industry grows. Then what else happens? The control system led to the industries being required to fund, partly at least, the political system, because we did not have any transparent, open system of political funding. We still don't. And that led to corruption, it led to crony capitalism, it led to the people at large distrusting the private sector, because this funding was done by the private sector. The public sector was not in a position to generate cash and give crores of rupees for political funding without accounts. So this was all done by the private sector, but it meant that the private sector, which obviously was evading taxes for doing this, diverting money partly to political purposes, partly for themselves, became totally distrusted by the people, because these guys are people who are cheating all of us, the workers and everybody else, by taking money out and showing that the company doesn't have money to pay us. And they become distrusted. The lifestyle of the promoters and owners of industries was also something which kept getting more and more ostentatious over the years, and that didn't add to any kind of trust building either. The labor laws were framed in the socialistic context, and therefore the dice was always loaded against industry, and the labor realized that they could do what they liked. They didn't have to increase productivity, they didn't have to have discipline, but they would always be supported both in the judicial system and by the government. So that is something which has remained for a long time. The PSUs, many of them did very good work, but by and large, PSUs did not produce competitive goods in terms of what is available. Because in the absence of competition, the improvement in the products and services which is required to be globally competitive does not happen. If you have nobody to compete with, you keep doing what you are doing and you continue. It did not create resources of their own to invest and grow their businesses, by and large. And the growth of most public sector companies took place by further and further injections of money from the government. So, the political system led to this in industry. It also led to another consequence, which was that to get votes, the best way of getting votes was by giving doles, subsidies, administered prices, and telling people, see what a good government we are making life cheaper for you. Something which is still going on in the city of ours, where we say that we should provide cheap things to everybody. Where the cheap things comes from, nobody worries about. Where that money for that comes from, nobody knows. But we all want to give products and services to people below cost, without bothering about increasing productivity or lowering cost. So when you divert money to these subsidies and doles and loss-making companies, the result is you don't have money left for infrastructure. And unlike the countries I mentioned, Japan, China, Korea, who built tremendous infrastructure over these years, we lag behind woefully in our infrastructure. Electricity generation has been a chronic shortage from ever since I remember, and that's a good 50 years now. It's always been a shortage. Shortage meant also that then there were regulations about who should suffer the first power cut when there was a shortage. And the answer is obvious. The first power cut was private industry, because industry was not such an important activity. It was important to give electricity to others because they had many more votes to vote. Who should subsidize the cheap power to the masses? Obviously industry. So industry could not be competitive if in all areas, and this is just doing. You look at the road structure, you look at the ports, in every way our infrastructure is way, way behind even countries which are smaller countries, which were far less developed than us, but our infrastructure is lagged behind all of them. We inherited the railways. How much improvement have we made to our railway system over these 65 years? Just consider what we inherited. Not even a 20% increase in the railway tracks in this 65 years. Because there was an outcry against corruption, we framed laws which ultimately didn't curb corruption, but they did curb the willingness of the decision makers to take decisions, because those laws could be used to put pressure on people who were not obliging enough for a political system. And the CBI and others were used to an extent for that purpose of managing the system. So you had cost overruns, time overruns, because people would not take decisions where decisions were required to get projects working on time. Now, this is the situation which we inherited. It changed slightly after 1991, not too much. The system remained equally bad. What should be done? In what way can we turn this 60 years of legacy behind us? And obviously there are many areas. All of us are complaining that government doesn't do this, government doesn't do that, we can't do this. And I don't think there would be a single person here who doesn't have a string of complaints against what is being done by some agency or other of the company. How to turn this situation around? The government wants manufacturing to grow. That's clear. Ease of growing business and all that is part of policy, but how should it happen? The more I've thought about it, the more I've come to the conclusion that the initiative for initiating real change in the system has to come from the private sector. The reason I'm saying this is that we must remember that we are in a political system, and we must understand and appreciate the realities of this political system. We are not in a position to even think of changing this political system. It won't change. So we have to see that within this political system, what can we do to actually make manufacturing a reality, make it possible for government to work with the private sector, to make the private sector competitive for growth, and thereby lead to job creation. Because, again, I'll repeat, unless the private sector becomes competitive, unless the private sector grows rapidly, there will not be job creation. And people have to understand that job creation is linked to the growth of the private sector, is linked therefore to the growth of wealth and assets of private entrepreneurs. Now, how to make people accept a situation where a government today, in today's political, social environment, works with the private sector so that the private sector grows rapidly. Because despite having chairman of private public sector companies here, I personally do not believe that the public sector in India can provide the competitive leadership for growth. It has not done so anywhere in the world. It has not done so in India over these 60 years. I don't think it can ever be done anywhere. Because the constraints on the public sector, it's not that the people are bad. The people in the public sector have done outstandingly, not sometimes the public sector, but especially when they've left the public sector, they've performed outstandingly. A lot of private sector people have relied on public sector managers to grow. Mittal built his steel empire based on employees who were earlier working with SAIL. They were the people who built the biggest steel empire in the world. So it's not that public sector people are bad. What I'm saying is the environment in India, the legal environment, the constitutional environment, the political environment is such that the public sector has just far too many constraints. They just cannot be overcome. So the question is again, how does the private sector put itself in that position? And I believe the only way that can happen is if private entrepreneurs, private businessmen, leaders of private business consider this question, realize that it is a challenge before them to win the trust and confidence of the people at large. Because once the politician sees that the private sector is doing things which are showing that they are actually going out to win the trust of the people, they will then feel confident to support the private sector. But as long as the perception remains that the private sector is corrupt, tax evaders, wasters of money, live ostentatiously, you will not get the government to do all that is required for being competitive. And when I say being competitive, I mean investors must find that doing business in India is not only easy, but in terms of costs of manufacturing and all that goes in manufacturing selling products, they are not disadvantageously placed compared to anywhere else. It's not a comparison with what we have and what we should have. It's a comparison with what others have and what is available elsewhere. Because an investor has choice. I think many of you will be aware of how many Indian businessmen are investing abroad today. Why are they doing it? Why are they not investing in India? Why are they investing outside? Why are people going away and becoming NRIs to do business outside India and not doing business in India? And the reason is that doing business in India is still very hard. And it will remain hard as long as the private sector does not create a new image for itself. And therefore, what I wanted to say today was that if the private sector changes its image and is not considered to be corrupt, tax evaders, generators of black money, corrupting the political system, taking bank loans and not repaying them, and all this kind of thing. If that happens, then what do you do? So, can the private sector start thinking of this? Can the private sector really come to the conclusion that it needs to change its image? It needs to change its image in the way people live, in the way they spend money, in the way they use company assets for private purposes, the way they run their companies, not for the benefit of the family, but for the benefit of all stakeholders of the company. There are many examples. I can give some examples from people from Maruti who have grown enormously over the last 25, 30 years. I have one vendor who started just one single small factory in Noida. Today, he is on his way to becoming the 15th or 16th largest component manufacturer in the world. He has a turnover of 40, 50,000 crores. He's like any other vendor, but he's grown. There are some 5, 6 others who have grown. The rest have not grown. Why? Before this meeting started, we were discussing and people said, oh, we've been studying Maruti, Maruti is a case study, doing this, that. I said, but who has emulated or adopted any of the practices of Maruti? If not, why not? I mean, what is the use of reading about it, studying it, having case studies, and doing all of that, but then not adopting any of those practices? And the reason is, adopting Maruti's practices requires change of lifestyle, change of the way you think and the way you behave. And that's why it's not being adopted. I ask people, do you know why it's adopted? Nobody has an answer to give me. But the answer is that you cannot adopt that lifestyle without changing your lifestyle. You cannot adopt those practices. Practices are based from Japan. I don't know how many of you know about the Japanese top management's way of life. How many are aware of it? A few are. Japanese presidents of the biggest companies, and companies which have 50, 60, 70 billion dollar businesses, are still paid not more than $1 million, $1.5 million a year. That's what, 6, 7, 8 crores a year. We have middle management in India who gets paid that much. They live in small houses. They drive their own cars. None of them have private jets and private yachts and such things. Marriages of workers and top people are done in almost the same manner. It's a Sunday morning function in a hotel in Japan. That's it. No 1 week festivities, 14 different functions, and all of that. So it's a question of lifestyle. How do you change your lifestyle? How do you think? If we continue to think that this lifestyle will survive forever, then I think some of us are going to find that they will be in for the good shot. So my request is that use this occasion of the Diamond Jubilee to really think of the future. Don't be in that sense of thinking that, oh, we'll see when it happens. Because sometimes when you look at, we'll see when it happens, it's too late. And if you do that, and if each one of you sets an example to others and talks to others, and I think a movement can start in the private sector for reforming and changing the way we have done. We cannot emulate the West. We cannot emulate the Americans in our system of politics and social conditions. That lifestyle is not possible here. So please consider, thank you for giving me this opportunity, and if I have hurt people's sentiments, I apologize. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shri Bhargavji, for your inspirational address.
What is your lesson for DMA? What is your lesson for DMA? Can they change their lifestyle?
This is the lesson.
DMA is all of you gentlemen and ladies. DMA is not a body itself. Everybody has to do what he wants to do.
Please give Shri Bhargava a big round of applause. Ladies and gentlemen, now I request the dignitaries and our life patron, Mr. C.S. Puri, to kindly release the special issue of DMA Diamond Jubilee Foundation Day souvenir. Thank you so much. May I now invite Mr. C.S. Puri, life patron DMA, to kindly present a small memento as a token of our love and affection to Shri R.C. Bhargava.
I think a big round of applause for Mr.
Thank you.
राजन आप हेल्प करिए